Call to order the Budget and Personnel Committee meeting, January 10th, 2023, 6 p.m. And at this time, I will entertain public comment, which we have none, so we will skip over that. Moving on to the first item on the, well, let's adopt the agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then budget review fiscal year 24, proposed fees for service, and we'll turn that over to Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Bott. Taking a look at the current taxes and fees for the year. You can see I have included them in your packet. Recent changes, just to review the recent changes, and you'll see the vast majority of these fees are pertain to building and zoning. We bumped all building and zoning fees 20% last year, as well as a little bit higher for the most frequently issued permits to the cohort average. Also, the tax rate was reduced last year as a result of reassessment from the county from 7 cents to 0.59 cents for 2023. And we reduced the personal property tax rate by 15% from 85 cents per hundred to 72 cents per hundred. And I can report to you that so far seems to be about the right amount. We've collected about 106% of our personal property at this time, so we didn't miss it by too much. The idea was to not, in the wake of the appreciating car values, not to tax people too onerously, and since we've collected about 106% of our budgeted revenues in personal property, I'd say we hit it about right. I would recommend on personal property that we, since car values are due to start decreasing in value at some point, that we hold on to this rate this year and see what happens, and get another year under our belt and see what happens with car values. Solid waste collection fee was increased in the spring of 2021 by 10 cents per week. I would recommend that we keep that the same for now. And that contract does come up this spring. We will be rebidding the solid waste contract this spring, as the current contract is up in the spring. With current renovations underway at the Civic Center and is scheduled to be completed by the beginning of FY24, I would suggest that we increase the center's rental rates beginning in 2024 to help repay for the capital investments that we're putting into that building. Also, I will say that I've checked with some of the events we've had. The people who are renting them have told me that we are just about the cheapest around when they go to take a look at venues. So don't mind being reasonable, but I don't know that we should be the absolute cheapest around. And I think an increase, since the center hasn't had one in some time, is due, especially in the wake of the renovations we're doing. So I would recommend that we increase the weekend rate from $1,200 a day to $1,800 per day, and that's for the entire center. And the main area only, which is the center less the classrooms, increase from $950 to $1,300 per day. I would not recommend an increase in the weekday fees or the nonprofit fees.
What's the weekday fee?
Weekday fee, and I apologize, I didn't bring it with me. The weekday fee, I believe, for the center is $450, something like that. Okay. It's high enough for the entire building, but since we are nobody's beating down our door to rent it during the week, I don't recommend that we increase those rates at all.
Do you ever have an occurrence where somebody would like to rent it for, say, 6 hours?
We do, but generally nobody comes to rent the entire building for 6 hours. They might want a classroom or two for 6 hours, which we can do, and the daily rate is reasonable enough. We just charge the daily rate.
Okay.
Because really, if they come in for the day, they want a little bit of time to prepare and a little bit of time to clean up afterwards. Each one of the day for that. Now, there are certain community activities that go on during the week that we really don't charge for. We have a couple civic groups that meet for an hour at a time that just come in, sit down, and get up and leave when they finish their meeting. and we don't charge for that. And we have done a couple gratis events that were well-deserved events, and when the center wasn't rented for a commercial event. And I would recommend that we raise those rates beginning July 1, and then reevaluate those in the following year. But the rest of the fees, fees for service and rates, I think would be adequate for FY24.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion, I guess, to accept the staff's recommendations unless there's further discussion on it.
So move.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And
Then we'll send this on to council for a full vote, or?
Yes.
yes. Projected revenues, fiscal year 24.
Okay, and I've got the latest and greatest on the screen in front of you. It's and what's revised about this from what was in your packet is that went through and took the time to let me put the right one up here. Here we go. Went through and took the time to give you actual numbers as of today. This is what's actually being posted, and that's on the screen here, not in your agenda. But these are actual numbers as of what was posted actually at the close of business yesterday. So we can get a better idea of what's going on. Again, looking at personal property, which is this line here, you can see that we budgeted $225,000, and we've collected $238 so far. And property taxes, or personal property, was due December 31st. So about all of those are in. That's a 6% difference, and like I said, we didn't miss it by much, so I would recommend leaving it right there for now. Moving on down, the big ones, meals tax. This year we're budgeted at $1.2 million. I budgeted 1.3 for next year is what I have in there. We've collected so far to date 1.017, which I believe is 86% of our budgeted revenues for this year. I think increasing it $100,000 is reasonable. Restaurants still report they're having issues finding help, and we're hoping that does not affect capacity. Franchise tax, we budgeted level. Sales tax, about the same. Business license is always right there, about the same numbers, as well as motor vehicles tax. Going down to transit occupancy, this year we're budgeted at $1.7 million. We have exceeded 100% of those revenues as of this date. The little bit of investigating, or I guess calling around, that I've done ahead of time indicate that we are at where we were last year this time, or maybe just a little bit behind in bookings. So I have upped that to $2.0 million or $2 million for next year. I think that's a reasonable increase, and that we should expect some increase, if nothing else, but increase in prices. But I think that's a reasonable increase. And bear in mind that, and I have done the analysis over here, and this is a little analysis I did last year. From January through June, as far as transient occupancy taxes, we collect 26, on average, 26% of our budget, January through June, of our revenues. In meals tax, we collect an average of 30% of our budgeted revenues in January through June of the fiscal year. So the vast majority of our revenues are collected in July through December of each year. Okay, so from those numbers, I can use that percentage to project what we will come out this year, using it just to get an idea, and that's why I did it last year. But so those big numbers there, or those big incomes there, I would project, like I said, meals at 1.3 and transient at 2.0, and I think those are conservative enough that we can hit those.
Because your last transient occupancy that gets counted for this year is technically May's stay, right? May's.
Correct. The
When's
last
the close of business on that? Is it before Labor Day, Memorial Day, I mean?
we will collect May's taxes in June, and
That'll be
by
the
June
fourth.
20th. So the last taxes posted for the fiscal year will
Is
be
in May.
actually the business in town in May.
May,
But it's
the
what we
last day of
collect in
May.
June.
So all of June basically doesn't get reported till July.
Till the following fiscal year.
And that's why
correct.
your July starts to be your heavy month, July, August.
So you're really getting June,
July, August, September. Yeah.
right on through that, and that's exactly right. Just going down and hitting some of the highlights here. We bumped building permits just a little bit to because we did increase fees. I did bump rental income on the trolley just a little bit because it hadn't been done so long. If you don't know, we rent offices to the trolley department, an office in the main municipal center, and we also rent a communications office back in our public works, and we get have been getting $15,000 a year. We're bumping that to 16 this year. Old Firehouse garage rents and town garage rents, it'll be around $40,000 next year. We have everything rented there with the exception of the ambulance bay, and I've had several inquiries for that, so I expect by the summer we'll probably have that rented as well. All those are year by year. We do not give anybody a longer lease than 1 year because we don't know what the final disposition of that building will be. Personal property tax relief, and this is a to the dollar, the same thing we get every year. The idea is here we give personal property tax relief for vehicles under $1,000. We give 100%. And vehicles under, I believe it's $15,000, get 65% reduction for qualified individuals. I did an analysis of that this year because we don't want to be giving away more taxes than we receive from the state, and we are slightly over. We're giving back slightly over what we are receiving from the state. So I'd recommend right now that we hold on to that because vehicle values will probably be decreasing a little bit. So I do not recommend a change in that, and that was one of my focuses this year, was to get that under control. The typical $100,000 that are cost recovered to general fund from the water department. Solid waste collection fee, we've budgeted about level. Police grants, $131,000, and this includes the grant for the high school SRO as well as the elementary school SRO. We expect to at least get the high schools one more time. We're not sure about the elementary schools. We may get it, we may not. But my focus here in the next few months is going to be to try to shift those costs to Accomack County because they're paying for the other SROs. They should be paying for these. But when the grants run out, I want these Accomack County to pick them up. So we'll be discussing this with our school board representatives and also with some county officials. Dispatch revenue that we get from the Fish and Wildlife is up slightly. That's set to increase 5% a year. It started at $12,000. VDOT maintenance funds are up to almost $800,000 this year. That's good news. And if you look at everything, we should be getting project general fund revenues at just over $7 million. Moving on to the harbor. Harbor rents are about steady. Subleases, Vernon always does an excellent job at subleases, and we expect our Virginia Port Authority grant to be about $165,000, although we have not yet gotten the estimate for that. We will have that in the next few weeks, but it should be in the neighborhood, and that's a 75-25% grant, so we'll have 25% in that. And this year's project, I think, as you know, what we'll be applying for is a new floating docks at Buckley Park to help get more transient boaters downtown. Fuel revenue, we're projecting it about the same, $375,000. Fuel prices have increased slightly, but we think we can swing that. So total harbor income of right around $700,000. Trolley, we reviewed at the last meeting, last council meeting, so I won't review that again. Water. Water rents have been somewhat steady, so we're projecting it at level. The thing we have done with water in the last few years is we've been able to economize a little bit because capital improvements were made earlier. So we cut back just there a little bit. And that's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to be just over $1 million in the water revenues for this year. Center revenues, as always, most of the revenue comes from meals and transient occupancy tax, 5% from meals and 5% from transient occupancy. We're also projecting about $38,000 in facility rental. If I can get a qualified applicant to take over center director, I expect that marketing to take off, and that number should easily double in 1 year. But we're not quite there yet. So looking at a total revenue this year of about $9.2 million. And if you look, last year's total revenue was 9.7. We will not have any ARPA funds coming our way this year as we did last. So, and if you're interested, that difference is $253,025 less this year than last.
All right, do we need to make a move on this, or is this just going to
This is informational.
information? Because this gets approved with the total budget.
This will get approved as the total budget in the process. This is informational to give you an opportunity to, it's made public, to give you an opportunity to review it, make comments, request changes, request more information, anything you'd like to do. Of course, we're not presenting this at the total count, at the regular council meetings. We're doing it in budget personnel workshop meetings and trying to get it all done there. So this document, as you know, has been published on the website. It's available to whoever wants to look at it with the agenda.
Good start.
All right, and then fiscal year 24 capital improvement program.
Let's see, get back to this. And I will say that this is a working document here, but I think it's the first time we've actually presented a capital improvement program to you, at least since I've been employed here. We've divided this up in categories: Parks and Rec, Harbor, Municipal Center and Public Works, Water Department, Police Department, EMS, and Civic Center. And projects are denoted pretty straightforward. Brianna's Park is BK, things like that. So the nomenclature, each project has its own identifier and description. And this is the summary page. There will be, and is in production right now, a single page for each project, giving the project name, the scope of the project, the justification for the project, and a little bit of detail about the pricing of that project. So this is the summary page, which gives you the most information on one sheet. If you look at Parks and Rec, of course, FY23 is our current fiscal year, and you see all the numbers there. Those all should be familiar to you. And I will say one other thing. When you look at the total down here by year, and you're looking at the total for FY23, 24, 25, and 26, and 27, which for some reason that didn't total. But the object here is to balance the project so that you don't, your total capital improvements don't go up and down like a hurricane every year. You want to try to balance that so that you're spending allocating the same amount of money for capital projects each year, unless of course you're getting grants from somebody else is funding it. You want to try to even your capital costs, and we've tried to a certain extent to do that. But looking at FY24, Howard Wilton Dog Park, they want some new equipment there, a sunshade. Parks and Rec wants a sunshade for that. There's a few other things. And we're only looking at 24 right now. Memorial Park, project MP8, that's repaved the parking lot there and driveway. And I will say that if you look at MP10, because the next question would be, I know we need to expand boat parking, we're getting a brand new ramp down there. If you look at MP10, West is doing that estimate right now. He's almost done with it, but that's additional boat parking down there. Additional trailer parking. We're going to double the trailer parking down there by taking right field out of the baseball field. Robert Reed Park replaced the slips with a floating dock. That number is a placeholder until we actually get the quote from Ravens. Moving down to the harbor, we still have 200 feet of bulkhead strengthening to do, and by strengthening I mean we're adding bottom whalers, which weren't done originally for some reason, and we've had some problems with blowout before, so we're adding those whalers as a proactive project. Fuel system upgrades at Curtis Merritt Harbor. What we would like to do down there is put a, that will help us with upgrading our internet down there for the fuel system, that number. There's several things we want to do. There's some more projects even in here, like CMH12 is to install fiber optic cable from the office to the fuel pump down there and get rid of the over-air internet that we have down there to be much more reliable and secure. Looking down the long-term replacement at the harbor, we budget about $50,000 each year to go in long-term replacement that we transfer at the end of the year, just for when the harbor needs major work. The municipal center replacement trolley, I think you all know that number should actually be in FY23 because it will be here in this year. Property acquisition, we'd like to budget some more money for property acquisition. We feel like we need that. We should always keep a good amount in there. We need to replace some office furniture in both in the municipal center, in the town office, and $15,000 gets us started on that. Some of this furniture's been there since when the building opened 20-some years ago, 26 years or so ago. Replace the council table. That's part of our renovations that we're trying to do in this room, but the grant that we have certainly is not going to give us enough money to do that, so I've budgeted that for the next fiscal year. Public Works, replace another vehicle, which is an ongoing replacement. Fuel pump replacement, that pump is on its last legs, and because that pump not only services Public Works, but also the police department and EMS and the fire department, we feel like we need to go ahead and get that replaced to something that's more reliable. Wastewater future sewage disposal, that is basically a number that will get us some engineering work done. Install a transfer switch to the backup generator, the standby generator back at the back at the Public Works Department. That's been on the books for quite some time. Moving down to the Water Department, water bonds are something we're budgeted for the next 3 fiscal years until we pay that particular bond off. I think we just finished paying off the first bond last year. Made the last payment on that. We still need to put some VFDs on our lift pumps, and we'd like to get started on our meter distribution. And what that is metering some of the specific zones on the instead of metering individual properties, we'd be metering specific zones on the island. That way we can tell if we have a leak in the system that's not showing up in someone's house or property, but it show up in the system itself. And just some general replacing of equipment in the water department. Moving down to the police department, we need to upgrade some of their furniture as well. Theirs have been here, just as I said, since the building opened, and we need to start replacing it. And we have a new patrol vehicle also in FY24, which is, and again, an ongoing replacement of existing equipment. Moving down to the Civic Center, the big ones, of course, are in this fiscal year, and that's HVAC and AV upgrades, which are in the works. But we'd like to do some interior painting and some upgrading to the kitchen. So there's $20,000 for each of those in FY24. Now that being said, there are other projects, that's FY24, there are other projects going out 3 more years, and if anyone would like to take a look and ask questions about those, I'll be happy to answer them.
The bathrooms out at the chamber.
Yes.
Is that on there anywhere? Do we
Yes.
still have that on there?
If you look at, they are, give me just a second, I will find them. They're in the Public Works Department, I believe.
Last PW15.
Okay, there it is, Public Works Chamber.
Yep, and I believe there's a separate item, yes. I think there's 2 items there. No, I'll put it all in one, because I had one item in for sewage, and I had another item in for combine them into this one, into that one item. And we, if you remember, we applied for a grant last year, or the Eastern Shore Chamber asked if we would like to participate, and we did, but I contacted the Eastern Shore Chamber last month, and they told us that they were not successful in getting that grant, because Exmoor, Nancock, and the town of Shinnecock were all applying to the same grant, all asking for public restrooms. And we were not successful, so we'll be looking for other funding sources for that. And I might stress that all these numbers on here, and these are in tens of thousands of dollars, by the way. The threshold for this plan is $10,000. There'll be no projects under $10,000 included. If it's under $10,000, we'll include it in our regular budget. But all of these projects, not all of them come from our budget. We hope to fund as many as we can through grants and other funding sources, of course. So that's not something that, looking down here and you look at FY20, you look at FY26 and you're seeing over $1 million or almost $2 million, that we certainly hope that's not all our money. Well, it can't be all our money, of course. So, but again, and there may be projects that you've had in mind or been on your mind for quite some time that you don't see on here. Please let me know if we've forgotten something. We'll certainly include it. Wes is almost done. And the highlighted cells you see there are cells where we're still working on estimates that we should be filling in the next few days. And by the time we meet next month, I should have the completed capital improvement plan, the summary, as well as the detail sheets, which I will gladly upload to you. I won't give you a stack of paper because it won't be about that big.
And we've got some more ARPA money to spend too.
We do, and the ARPA committee, we've spent some. We've got some others dedicated. We've got some plant improvements that we have to do to this sewage plant, but also need to build a collection system.
Right.
And I'm currently in talks, and preliminary talks with a few engineering firms. I had a meeting today with a sales guy about some equipment, but trying to get some ideas on what sort of money that's going to cost us overall. And we'll eventually go out, hopefully not too far from now, go out for an RFP with an engineering firm to design a collection system.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think I remember you saying in your talks with the league at the DEQ that there could be some grant money available for
Absolutely.
collection system?
Absolutely.
You've got Cropper Street on there for the water department.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't identified any other future streets. I know that's not our last one, probably.
No.
Or has he just not gotten that far ahead in his long range
We've just
plan?
not got that far ahead. I think Mumford and Cropper were the two worst.
Okay.
We'd really like to widen Park Street, but that's not in the cards since we've already built that. But those were identified early on in my employment anyhow as the two worst on the island so far as drainage and road base.
I was just curious.
Just to hit on that real quick, Anderton Avenue, was that done quite a while ago, and just the drainage things there were not taken care of, or has that street been done altogether with
that
replacement
street-
of pipe?
My understanding from talking to the guys that were here was that that street was done, but the drainage, the DIs were not addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, they told me it was terracotta pipe, which is very brittle. And when you try to work with it, sometimes you end up with a bigger mess than when you started, and a bigger fix than that you were trying to fix originally. But I will say that the guys back here in Public Works figured out how to raise those DIs up to where they're much better than they were. Mm-hmm. They were quite a hole before.
Yeah.
But they were not addressed when the road was done.
All right. So this is for information, right? No action on this?
Yes, sir. This is part of the presentation of the budget.
All right. So at this time, capital improvement program. This time I entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So move.
Second, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So we're gonna now go into closed meeting in accordance with 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia.